All right, so now we've been talking about performance management here and reviews and evaluations and stuff. And there's a variety of issues that impact this overall performance management process. Okay? Number one, it's a context. And so clearly, we know in psychology, that behavior is context specific. And so we find behavior on the bus is different than behavior at the grocery store, which is different from behavior at work, etc. And so more recent work on performance management has begun to acknowledge that the context in which the appraisal process occurs matters. Say, for example, if an employee is talking to their manager on the assembly line with their peers next to them, that's a completely different process than if they're called into a separate office that they have never been in before, except for this particular. So clearly, the context matters in many ways. Many ways, the context matters. We find reaction criteria, and again, as I said, I have certain of my colleagues that when they get their information from their annual reviews or annual reports from the dean, they say, I don't give a shit, okay? And so that's a reaction criterion. And so reaction criteria are perhaps more important than the actual accuracy. So even if you have a performance management system that is 100% accurate, which it won't be, of course, but 100% accurate, but people don't care, it's garbage, okay? So clearly it is a hugely important thing, okay? Another very interesting issue impacting is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is the idea that employees or people that are relatively low in cognitive skills do not have the metacognitive skills necessary to evaluate themselves. And so as you can see here, along the bottom is we'll say cognitive skills or competence, okay? And those at the lower end of the competence scale, you see what happens is here is the truth of what their performance is. The bottom diamond is the truth of their performance. The top diamond is, or no, top square, I guess, is what they think they are, okay? So you can see what happens is that people at the bottom end of the competency scale are most likely to overestimate their abilities. Once we get to the higher end of the competency scale, we actually see a slight shift in the opposite direction. Okay? Leader-member exchange is the idea that managers or supervisors have different relationships with different subordinates, and these different, and we're going to talk more about this when we talk about management styles later on. And so this has clear implications in the performance management process, because what happens is, let's say, for example, employees that have lots of interaction with the supervisor have a radically different outcome in performance management than an employee that rarely sees the manager, okay? And that could be just physical isolation or, geographical locations. So clearly there's implications here. Politics, absolutely. Subordinates use impression management. Of course they do. They're going to try to make a good impression on the boss. I'll admit I do this. Sometimes I come to school in shorts and a t-shirt. Occasionally I do, okay? You know when that's going to happen? On a day when I am pretty much 100% positive I will have no interactions with the dean or the provost or the president. On days that I'm fairly certain I'm going to have some interaction with the dean or the provost or the president, I'm probably going to wear a tie that day, okay? So we all do it, okay? We all are trying to set the tone. Part of it is, of course, this trust, that we find that if you trust the system, and again, it's just like the accuracy of a performance management system is irrelevant if nobody trusts it, okay? It just can't be used. I love this this study down here. I actually learned about this one a long time ago. And it's if a manager feels comfortable in their employment, that is to say, they feel that they have job security, then they will make accurate appraisals. But if a manager has less job security, they'll be more lenient. Okay, they'll be more concerned about keeping the peace in the short run rather than the long-term best interests of the corporation. So I mean, literally, job security is critical for corporations to ensure that you have corporate investment, right, by your employees. I mean, so that's pretty good. We find justice. That is to say, if employees view the rating system as unfair, even if it's accurate, even if it's 100% accurate, if it's perceived as unfair, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's garbage. Or here, that this notion of implicit person theory, and again, we're going to talk about manager X versus manager Y, McGregor's theory later. And the idea is some people just believe that job performance is something that is inherently inside of you, and you're born with it, and it can't really be changed. Other people believe that job performance is a function of, external issues that can be modified and changed. And so it's pretty clear if a manager believes that behavior is 100% rigidly controlled from the inside and cannot be changed, what's the point of performance management? If an employee sucks, they suck. Okay? But somebody that believes that behavior is controlled by more external sources is going to say, okay, the point of the performance management cycle is to look at your current level of performance, identify obstacles that are lowering your current level of performance, and remove those obstacles. Okay? Participation, and we already mentioned this, that when employees are in fact involved, like in 360-degree feedback process, when employees are in fact involved in the performance management process, there's a strong positive relationship with their reaction to it. Okay? The perceived knowledge of the system, and this is important as well, that if you are an employee and you are being evaluated, but you don't know what it is you're being evaluated on, how can you feel any kind of justice? Okay? And so, absolutely, the performance management process should be explicitly written out. And in fact, at Texas Wesleyan University, to a large degree, the faculty handbook contains an entire section on annual performance reviews and a huge section on the tenure process. Okay, so it's quite clear that you must have a lot of that. Just because it's in there doesn't mean people read it. I was the chair of the Tenure and Promotion Committee, and it was amazing how people that were up for the most important thing in their life didn't read 5 pages in the faculty handbook. It was so clear. I don't get it. All right. So clearly, as we talk, performance appraisal has potential implications in legal settings. That is, if an employee is terminated based on the results of a job of performance management, then it's pretty clear that potential lawsuits can involve. Okay, so legal recommendations, whenever setting up your performance management criterion, go back to the job analysis. All right, how are you going to define job performance? Go to the job analysis that was done at the very beginning. Okay, performance standards in writing. Yeah, put it into a book. Recognize separate dimensions. Try to avoid that halo effect, right? Using objective criteria as well as subjective. Objective criteria, number of unexcused absences. I mean, something like this. You should have an appeal mechanism, absolutely. If you have a negative performance, then there should be a way to kick it up the system to another manager, okay? Multiple raters, document, and written instructions for the raters. Yes, rubrics. Okay? So one of the biggest recent court cases involving performance management was Ford. I mean, other companies did this as well. But what they would do is they would rate their managers into 3 categories: the top 10%, the middle 80%, and the bottom 10%. And so a manager in the bottom category gets no raise, okay? And if you're in the bottom category 2 years in a row, then you're fired, okay? And this seems sensible, right? Look at this. The chairman of GE, eliminating the bottom 10% is doing them a favor by making them aware that they suck. And you always remove the bottom 10%. And so because it's a forced distribution, there's always going to be a bottom 10%. And we talked about this in the very first and the second video in this module. And that is, if this particular group that you're being compared to is outstanding, the bottom 10% may be just fine performers, but they're still going to be the bottom 10% because there will always be a bottom 10%. And the bottom 10% often is littered more heavily with age, gender, and race issues. Okay? So they looked at different court decisions, and they looked at, what was it that seemed to influence the judgments. Okay? And so if you want to have a judgment in favor of the company, you should have a job analysis used to define the performance management. Written instructions need to be clear. Okay, clear to who? Employees can review their own appraisals. All right, multiple raters and rater training. But the format, the way the checklist, behavior anchored ratings, it didn't seem to matter. Okay, these other ones did in a variety of lawsuits. All right, so that's what we got for the performance appraisal